Welcome to Pulse, a podcast that cuts through the noise. We're here to get under the skin of what's actually working in marketing and culture right now. On our very first episode, we are joined by Arun Lloyd, Associate Director of Hope and Glory PR. Hello,
Hello.
Aaron. Welcome, Aaron. Welcome. So just to start out, just give us a snapshot of what you've been up to and your kind of current role within Hope and Glory.
Current role. So I'm associate director. I've been here for about 6.5 years now. Been in PR for probably 11. Backgrounds across all sorts, from tech with Sony, travel American Airlines, culture with Adidas, through to like a bunch of booze brands, and now working mainly with the likes of Aperol, Courvoisier, and Pepsi Global. My roles, I guess, over the last 2 years transitioned more to global, strategic based work, as well as obviously bits of UK as well.
Nice. So PR, just like a little bit of an overview, the last few years, how has it kind of shifted as an industry? What are some of the things at the moment that you're facing? What are some of the things you're seeing in terms of, the current kind of trends and cutting edge kind of things that are happening within that industry?
So I'll start with probably the change in that I think when people think of PR, they think of straight earned editorial media only. And it's like, newspapers, online headlines, and that's kind of what PR is. And we as an agency are very much still earned first. But actually, over the last couple of years, the expectation is now that that's much more integrated, right? Just getting PR coverage off the back of it is rarely it. It's always got some form of social baked in. Now, a couple of years ago, that would have been let's do a PR campaign and add an influencer, and it's integrated. And it's not that anymore. Client expectations got more complex. Their expectation is that actually people are seeing it, hearing it, living it where they are. And I think that's probably the key, switch for us is going from channel, i.e., is this going to be online? Is it going to be print? Is it going to be weekend paper? Is it going to be in a consumer lifestyle or a culture title? To actually, where's our audience? And like moving towards trying to work out how we're actually reaching them. Not on paper, they should be reaching this, reading this, but like where are they actually looking? What are they talking about? And how are they going to share this with their people? So that actually what we're doing is we're creating conversation in the places they already are. So I think that's kind of the evolution, the expectation now from clients, from ourselves, is that we're coming up with work that earns attention, but where people are, and we're actually going to them, not expecting them to come to the places they've traditionally been and expecting that still to work, because it's just not the case.
Yeah, interesting. And I guess it's like how earned and PR sits at the center almost of a lot of the different channels that brands are using, right? Whether it's owned, social, events, experiential, it's empowering all of those different channels and bringing it all together. It's really interesting.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we'll probably get on to talk about it, but experiential and in real life, for example, again, the expectation before would have been what headlines are we getting off the back of that pop up? Where is it going to get that coverage? Where, yes, that's still important, don't get me wrong, because people that can't go there, we still want them to hear about it, right? But actually, it's so much more about engaging with people in a way that feels meaningful. So that pop up, that experiential activity, there's a lot more thought going into the experience itself, not what's that one hero PR picture? What's that going to look like on the front page of the whatever title? And actually, how are we really going to get something that people want to come to? They're going to take their own content and they're going to share and tell their friends about this brand did this insane thing in this place and actually talk about it off the back of it, and that's the important bit, right? Because that's when you're infiltrating people's lives and doing something that makes a difference to their kind of everyday.
Yeah, I guess the role of creativity then becomes more important, right? So this, because integrated is not just PR, that's happening across other industries as well. And I think where you have to exist in different pockets and you have to turn into different formats. So it's not just a pop-up, you have to do a pop-up that also translates into a social media asset or whatever it might be. So how are you finding that is that an exciting challenge to think more creatively around that integration and how you're taking a pop-up, but then how does that then exist in lots of different kind of pockets and kind of ecosystems? And are you thinking about it like that in terms of that almost ecosystem effect where it's, that centralized idea has to then translate into lots of different types of moments that create that kind of integrated kind of PR moment?
100%. And I think it's all at the planning stage, right? You can't expect those things to happen by themselves. It's not by chance that XYZ, it has popped up in all these multiple places. It's that it's been thought about from the beginning. And again, that's a change in how we plan campaigns over the last couple of years, it's working the right partners to think actually down to who is shooting the content, because we want it to look a certain way, because we know that that's going to travel further than if we did the standard, let's just get anybody down to capture it, because it has to look a certain way, right? It has to be a certain length. It has to open in a certain way. It has to have a certain amount of brand visibility, but not too much, because we know that will turn people off. There's so much thought that goes into even that granular part of the campaign, let alone what's the experience, what's the PR bit, who are we inviting down, how are we getting consumers there. There's so much that goes on. But at every stage, you have to be very intentional about it, because otherwise that just doesn't get further than that, because everyone is trying to do it, right? And people that are focusing on one part of that and doing it really well, they're going to win that. So it is becoming very meticulous. And actually, I think this is where our expertise comes into play with educating clients on the importance of that stuff, because we're close to this. You know, we see this day to day, we're thinking about it all the time. We're looking at campaigns and saying, oh, they did that really well. Let's note down the person that shot that. Let's note down those influencers that actually got great engagement from it or produced really good content. So we've got them banked later. Clients are on the other side having their own internal client battles that they've got to deal with every day. They don't have the time. They're not in that world in the same way. And actually, when you try and explain that sometimes, you have to really build a case as to why it's important, because to them, you know, the nuances aren't that important. But we know if you don't get that quite right, if you don't choose the right people, then, you know, it's just going to fall down. And ultimately, it then comes down to us not delivering results. So I'd say it's a bit of a challenge. It's definitely a two-way thing. And it's something that clients are definitely getting better at, because they're hearing it more from everybody. If they've got a social agency, if they've got a culture marketing agency, if they've got a above the line ad agency, they're probably all telling them similar things, right? So they're hearing it, but it's definitely like an ongoing education, which isn't by any means a straightforward conversation.
And I guess within that measurement, right? So you touched on it there, but with the way that things are shifting, I'm guessing that the measurement has changed as well in terms of what clients are expecting, but also how you're shaping your campaigns for success. Like, tell us a little bit about, at the moment, what are you kind of guys doing in terms of measurement, or how has that changed over the past kind of 12 months and maybe into the future?
So I'd say traditionally, PR has been based on some quite standardized KPIs that would focus on certain metrics. So reach of a campaign, editorial reach, social reach, you know, engagement on the post, views on a video, you know, the standard kind of stuff. And they're really important still because they're tangible and you can prove this many people had the opportunity to see it, many people engage with it. But actually, I think it gets more tricky when you go back to what we were talking about, you know, events and experiences, for example, where a lot of the time and effort is put into creating something that people come and feel. How do you measure that? Like, where's the tangible element of that? You could say you got X amount of people through the door. If that's 100 people that you got through the door, but they are bang on your target audience and they've gone and told all of their friends and they've posted about it, that's arguably way more important to everybody and more successful than, you know, 5 news headlines that's delivered you 5 million in reach, because who's really seen it? Has it been that target audience? And then it comes back to doing everything from that audience point of view, right? So I think measurement, there are still those classic KPIs and still classic metrics that we'll use on a regular basis because they are really important and they are really tangible. I think the future is about trying to work out how you gauge sentiment better. And, you know, AI is going to come up in everything that we talk about all the time. But actually, there's some incredible tools out there now that do not just how far did it go, how many people saw it, but actually based on what they posted and the words and the language and the emojis they used, what's the sentiment behind that post? You know, and looking at the comments and doing all of that analysis for you, so that actually you're not manually digging through them and working it out. You've got a real sense based on this great tool of how people have actually engaged with something. And then you get feeling and then you get emotion. And all of a sudden you've turned something that was probably intangible before, apart from a vibe check when people are leaving. Like, did you have a good time? Yeah, cool. All right. See you the next one. To, you know what, everything that's come off the back of it has been, you know, 87% positive, with a couple of people not sure about that element because they said, you know, the organization might have been better or whatever. You've got a way of measuring how people feel about it. And I think that for us is something that we're still trying to work really hard on to crack, because ultimately we all know in this room that when people feel something about a brand, then that's when you get fans and loyal customers and people that are going to be your kind of mouthpieces outside of you forcing the message onto them, right?
I think you touched on something quite interesting there, which is the insight, right? So like, how is it that you're almost extracting the insight from people that come down to the various brand moments that you're doing? And it's that relationship between, the analysis on, tools that can kind of measure sentiment and likes and reach and engagement and all the rest of it, but then also speaking to the consumer and speaking to them and actually understanding what was the kind of experience that they had. And then, we're doing a lot of work at the moment around like, how culture and campaigns are measured, not just in flash of the pan moments and in silos, but what does that look like over like a 12-month period? Moving brands into that way of thinking where it's like, what are we right now? Where are we? Who are we? And what are we trying to be in 12 months' time? And then what are the things in place to kind of help us get there? Are you seeing that a lot with, a lot of clients and brands that you're working with? Is there that long-term thinking of, I guess, cultural growth or where they're hoping to get to?
It's a good question, and it's so dependent, right? I think we work with brands that are, the IKEAs and the kind of like big global brands that have a understanding of who they are, who their audience is, what they want to be talking about, and they've got a very clear direction and strategy of where they've been and where they're going. We often see that I think it depends on the campaign. So some campaigns that we get given, some briefs we get given are, we need to launch this one thing and we just want people to talk about that for a minute, and then that's going to do a job of launching that product. We've then got a lot of, I guess, longer term strategy work that's going on where this campaign is part of something bigger. It's part of a bigger platform that might have been created, that actually this is going to stretch over the next year or two. And actually this is just one part of getting people to think about us in this type of way. And again, that comes back to feeling and being memorable about what that one thing did. And even if it's not trying to drive a product sale, it's not trying to drive, a social media page following, it's not trying to drive anything really tangible like that. It's that halo effect of, oh yeah, we've seen them turn up in this place with that person. We've seen them come to this community and do something there and drive that little meaning. And when you do those time and time again, and we this is what we love to do, and we'll try and do more of. But again, it's about the brief and about how far down the journey the client and the brand is. And when you're working with global brands, that gets a bit trickier, right? Because they've got a strategy that's not coming from something that we can necessarily influence. So, it is all dependent, and ideally everything you're doing is laddering up to something much bigger. But the reality is sometimes like we need to launch product. Like, let's just go and sell some stuff,
But we talk about it as a kind of fast and slow culture.
Yeah.
So you have the tactical things that are going to get you your immediate KPIs, your kind of quick wins, getting that reach, getting, sales around a product, whatever it might be. But you need the slow thinking as well to be able to think about, what do we represent in culture? How do we turn up and how do we be consistent? Because if you do just one moment, then you're not necessarily going to be remembered for that. You're not necessarily going to be, you might get some engagement at that event, but it's not going to really shift the needle in terms of how that perception is around the brand.
Yeah.
Are you seeing in your industry, which maybe was a bit more around the kind of short kind of hand and more of a big moment, are you seeing that longer thinking and strategy around the brand integrated in, or how does that work in?
Yes, to an extent. I think IKEA is probably a really great example. I mentioned them. They just opened their brand new store, Central London, Regent Street, been a long time in the making. And it's a brand that means something to everyone in some way, right? It doesn't matter how old you are, doesn't matter what family you've got at home, doesn't matter where you live, if you're a uni student, if you're a big family, if you're a single person, like, you've got a link to them and probably a perception. And it's a great example of a brand that, it sells products and it's going to always do that. But when they came to London, they briefed us with making sure that it was all about London. And it was, they're opening their first Central London store, and they want to show that they serve all of London's different communities, right? So the brief to us was to do that. So what we did is, yes, there was this massive opening where we strapped some sofas to the top of cabs and drove them around London to show that we could deliver the product. Opened the House of Fractal, where we took the Fractal bag and did a personalization station. It was that one flash in the pan, big opening. But around that, we then created the House Party series, and we did 5 house parties, 5 different parts of London, kebab shops, a library, actual library, and we threw raves in them. And it was kind of minimally branded, but what it was tapping into places that people were and showing that actually wherever you are, wherever you're hanging out on a regular basis, wherever part of London you're at, we've got you covered. And it was very light touch in terms of, IKEA product and branding, but actually it was more about people coming and experiencing IKEA in a brand new way that they would never have done before. And again, we're back to that meaning point that went all over social. Yes, we reached 1.2 million people with the editorial. Yes, we got hundreds of social posts, but actually, it was the fact that my dad saw it and he was like, what? I don't get that. He's not meant to get it. That's great. But he saw it. Do you know what I mean? And he saw that IKEA had done some raves, and to the people, Gen Z, who we were targeting, they saw it, they shared it, they talked about it. And actually, that is part of that kind of wider, what are you trying to mean to people? Yes, we're selling products. Those events weren't about products at all. They were just about creating something that people would want to talk about. And again, creating meaning about London. And that was a great brief from us, because you don't often get brands that are willing to be that focused and not care about my dad, because they want to appeal to everyone because they've got that wide audience. So that's important, I think.
The piece there, like IKEA does mean a lot to a lot of different people. They've grown up with the products, they've grown up with the brand. And, even when we worked together on this project, and when we were speaking to tastemakers in our network about, what was happening and recruiting and getting people down for the guest list, it was a much easier sell because they were actually engaged with the campaign. They wanted to be part of it. And because conceptually it was such a great idea, it flowed in. It was part of the cultural conversation. It made sense. And I think that's what it comes down to, it's especially with like from an insights point of view, you guys, and we smashed it in terms of like really understanding how to tell that message authentically. And that's why it worked. Right? Interestingly on that, as been kind of touched on, the reception from people that we talked to was everybody like, IKEA, oh my god, I want to be a part of this project. This is amazing. What an amazing brand.
Yeah.
And there's a thing there where like brands like IKEA sometimes don't do that. They don't make that move into working with the kind of cool cultural partners, even though there's probably so much opportunity out there. There's probably so many people that would love to work with your brand or would love to do something cool, but the brands aren't maybe creating that bridge. So IKEA is obviously amazing that they kind of gave you that brief, and it was something that was creative and allowed you to kind of culturally kind of tap into that kind of London ecosystem in a credible way, and not in a way which was like maybe just a bit more generic, like you maybe would have seen other brands doing that similar kind of situation.
Yeah, and I think like everyone talks about authenticity, right? And it's I've not heard that word. It's one of those buzzwords. It just gets bandied about, right? And it's like, I think, but you cannot undervalue the importance of it coming across as authentic, whatever you're doing, and feeling authentic. Because people see through marketing, they see through a brand trying to badge themselves into something where in a place they don't belong, or partnering with this one person. They're like, oh, they're cool, so we're going to be cool, And I think it's hard because not all brands have a place. You have to have a link. Otherwise, it's really obvious. It doesn't matter how many people you work with, how much money you throw at it, how many cool places you show up in. If people can't understand it and actually put it together, being like, all right, cool, yeah, I get that, and it makes sense, and accept that you're allowed to be there, it probably has a damaging effect. Right? Because people see you as a bit corny and a bit like, nah, they don't really know what they're doing and they're not talking to me. And nah, there are so many other people doing this right. I'm just going to go and be with them,
Some of the biggest challenges that we see from brand side is that they don't know who they are and they don't know what they represent. And that's without those foundations of actually understanding that, what is our place within this world right now, within our audience lives, how do they actually perceive us? And then ultimately, what do we need to be doing within culture that actually lines the two together? You're not going to be able to create these moments with, like IKEA house party, which just work, because people will be like, exactly say, that does look corny and it doesn't feel right. It comes from knowledge of what's going on within that place. Like I saw the Cortez, New York stuff they did, and obviously they're amazing. Obviously always use them as a case study, but they just tapped into New York in a way as if they were locals, right? They took over a bodega. They did something on the New York subway. They did something else which was very, very. Oh, was it like a bus? They took over almost an American school bus. But that is a brand that understands how to do it, right? Like if you're going to go somewhere, don't try and take what you're doing in London and then take it over to New York. Like, do something that is going to resonate with people in New York. And with IKEA, that's kind of what you guys did to a certain extent, was what's going on within London, who are the local partners that can really make this credible. And that's the way the brand should really be thinking, is that how do you get that insight into what's really happening within the kind of audiences, within the scenes you're trying to access, and then use that to create something that feels local, feels kind of unique to.
And I think even with that, like, unless you're like culturally like fluent and you understand what is going on as a brand, if you don't know that, you're pretty much invisible. You know, other than what you may see across display ads or paid ads or whatever it might be. So that emotion of having a connection just will never be there. And I think that's what, you know, the IKEA campaign really did. The reception was unbelievable, right? You know, just seeing the excitement and the caliber of people that came down to it was.
And I think, yeah, Tom, you touched on it. It's like the community, understanding communities, right? Like Cortez are such a great example of it. And I've been waiting for them to not do something well. Like everywhere they go to Paris and they cause riots. They go to Rio and they've got all the locals down. Like they're so authentic in what they do, but also, as you say, got that nuanced understanding of what's important to people there. It is those very finely picked, the school bus, the subway, the meaningful things, right? And I think you've got to have people in those communities that you're talking to and understanding, not going in assuming you know it. And if you really want to do it properly, you've got to do that. And look, the IKEA one wasn't that deep. It was fun, you know, but they wanted to appeal to different communities, and even down to working with Lab 54, who do rave properly. And that's exactly what they do. They create the DJ lineup. And what happens is you've got people that want to go and see those DJs. You don't have, you know, IKEA directly choosing those people because they're not in the right place to do it. You know, it's about having those trusted partners and knowing that they're going to deliver on choosing the right people to then attract those people. And again, it's just that trust of layers of people that are doing their part of that funnel and not skipping to try and shortcut it. Because if you do, again, you get the wrong people down, the wrong DJs, you don't get the right people turning up to the thing, it doesn't have the same effect and people don't talk about it. Like, it has to be really meticulously planned.
Absolutely. And that's real. It's almost like the consistency then, to not just have like your one moment, and that's what Cortez do like amazingly, right? They have their launch, and then now we're almost waiting for that next thing. What's that next chapter that Cortez are going to kind of write around their brand and their story? And we're waiting to be told what it is and to be entertained. And I think that's the difference we're seeing now, is that more brands need to be able to almost have those chapters of what they're talking about and be consistent with it, you know, be intentional, be consistent around how you turn up, and not just think that you do one great campaign and that's going to solve all your problems.
Yeah. And you know, that's really interesting because I was actually, there are a bunch of brands that are doing arguably the opposite of that and have just gone full on, you know what, we want to talk to Gen Z and we're just going to be amazing on social. And we're not pushing a message. We're not pushing an agenda. We are just going to be so lo-fi and relatable that we're just going to be part of their lives anyway. And that to me is like as impactful, if not more, than these big shiny campaigns that you spend a lot of money on. Yes, they work, but everyone lives on social. Itsu, what? The Wilson Raider they brought back, Ronnie Pickering, and then the Wilson Raider, they brought memes back from how many years ago, and we were looking at it like, what? But we all know Itsu. Why are we talking about Itsu? Because they've just done this random stuff online, but actually it's just so clever.
There's like a new genre of like nostalgia memes or something.
Right? And all of a sudden, again, you're talking about meaningful. Like, those memes meant something to us back then. Am I going to go and buy an Itsu now? I don't know, but I'm thinking about them, you know, and they're currently back on my radar. And I think a lot of brands have done social very well recently. And I think to that wider strategy of like, who are you trying to appeal to? Forget the message for now. We just want to be on people's radars. Ryanair, Audi, you know, Glossier. I'm not a makeup user, but I know that their raw, like kind of unfiltered way of being is the total opposite to most of the their competitors. And all of a sudden you're doing social in a way that just really talks to people, or it's just funny and a bit weird. And you're like, cool, we're in the conversation.
That balance, isn't it, between mainstream and niche, and just being able to like actually see how the two play with each other, and that's what it's done so well. Yes, like,
but I think underpinning that is strategy, right? Like, I think you need to have Stephen Reiner, listening to like Michael and him talking about like what went on behind that, and they had a very clear strategic positioning of like, this is what people see us as. This is a perception of Ryanair, and then we're going to use our socials to challenge that perception. So it's a very tactical social plan on a consumer truth, basically. And I think some brands like Cortez, I don't think they probably have a strategy deck. I don't know. It's like almost instinctual. And some brands are doing very well through instinctual because they live and breathe social, as you said. And then other brands I feel are doing well with using social with a really strategic mind to tackle a consumer problem or to access and unlock a new consumer. I think that's the way it should be done, is kind of doing it in a tactical way where you're creating content, but there's thought behind it. Why are we creating it? How does this ladder into our values? How are we consistent, as we talked about earlier, in terms of how we're turning up? Like that's really important as well, right?
Yeah. And I think I've probably got to give a shout out to the Greggs team at Hope and Glory, because they do a bit of a mix of both. What we were talking about just now with Ryanair and Audi and people like that is finding their tone of voice and making sure that people really understand what that is, even if they're not necessarily talking about their product, right? You know what that brand is based on their social presence. Greggs have really cracked it in terms of like PR done well, because they know they don't take themselves too seriously. And all of the campaigns that they come up with play on that truth, that people know that that's what they are, and they're not trying to be anything different. So they partner with Phoenix to do a champagne and pastry pop-up in a high fashion, not high fashion, in a kind of luxury superstore. And then they go, Greggs Primark, let's do a fashion collab. What? All right, cool, I get that. Or they partner with KFC because they just know, great, one of our biggest competitors, but actually people love us both. Let's not take ourselves too serious and be like, oh, the competition, we're never going to do it. They've lent into partnerships, bringing Nigella on as their Christmas advert ambassador, and play. Like everything they do is so considered up to that wider strategy of this is what we want people to think about us as, and that's reflected in the wider PR campaign. So they've taken it further than just having that tone of voice on social, come up with these really clever campaigns that you look at and you're like, I get that. That only Greggs could really get away with doing that.
Real can like bend the rules in that way of like what is expected of a brand like Greggs, because they know exactly who they are, what they represent, and fundamentally their consumer, right? Who is it that's going to be buying this? But that's it. And to stand out in today's world across social media, where you've got thousands of pieces of content that are being hit at people every day, like you have to do something different, but it has to come from a place of knowing yourself, right? Like that's the key. Yeah. So we can talk about who's doing it well at the moment. Who do you think, any big examples of brands that are killing it?
Depends where. PR? PR.
PR and culture.
There are some campaigns that like just live in my head still, and they're a year old. And these are people that I think have like done it properly. Oatly and Gigs. Hyper local, off like a real insight, importantly, of like, funny, I can't even remember what that was, but it was something about the number of people that are lactose intolerant still want to eat custard or something like that. And they dialed into it and went big on that. Heinz Morley's, who go like that high-low thing. And I think for me, all the brands that are doing it really well are the ones that do it slightly unexpectedly. So both of those are a bit strange. Greg's example, a bit strange, because there are so many people trying to do big stunty PR things, which often look really great, right? And that's cool, and you can throw loads of money at it. But to me, they're the clever things where you're tapping into a real, probably small insight, and then building something out using someone like Gigs as your platform, using someone, doing a pop-up in the Standard, which Heinz and Morley's did, and getting Chip Down to perform. And you're like bringing the worlds really strangely together, and it just works.
It was real. That hyper-focused approach. And that comes down to, again, let's say the city strategy a lot of brands are adopting now, just understanding where they need to be turning up in a city. How people think in North London or communities or cultures or neighborhoods is very different to what would be in South London. But you can't build a campaign like what Oatly and Giggs did unless you get that.
Yeah.
And unless you go that deep, you understand the customer and the insights on that level. Because, you'd rather be incredible to 100 people than a bit meh to a 10,000.
That all came down to the execution as well, that Giggs thing. So it's like you've got the insight, you've got the perfect partner, you've got that thing, that Giggs obviously is lactose intolerant, whatever it might be. But it was all about that execution on that video that just, and seeing another side to Giggs as well, a bit of a humorous side. He's always like quite a serious guy. So that is again the nuances of what makes that so fantastic, and goes back to like you can have the insight, but it's about the strategy linking into the execution. All the kind of elements have to come together, right, to make it a fantastic campaign.
Yeah, I think it's where the industry's evolved almost even at the moment, isn't it? You need that ability to have hybrid thinkers and doers. It's not just you got your strategists or your creatives or your planners or whatever it might be. It's everyone needs to have an understanding how it all pieces together all the way through from the insight to the execution. Otherwise, there's so many opportunities to get it wrong. And then ultimately that's where budget gets wasted, and then what you produce isn't going to hit home.
Yeah. And this is where I think like
social again is such a big part of the future, because brands like, when you think of influencers traditionally and you think of ambassadors and people that front campaigns, and then you've got people like Burberry who they've just gone all in on content, right? And it's amazing content. They've got people like Cole Palmer, great, filming him fishing for an hour, and it's just a bit like, I did not. I don't know. Was it an hour? I don't know. It felt like an hour. And they're doing things, I distinctly remember that saying their name. I'm now thinking of that. I'm thinking of they posted something with a record that was in their tartan check, just spinning. Then they got Bus Auntie from TikTok and made her part of their campaign. And you're like, that is a brand that gets it. They get who is cool and are spending money with the right people. Cole Palmer, like, come on, if you're a football fan, doesn't matter who you support,
Represents Britain.
He is so perfect, right? And then you've got The Social with Bus Auntie, who is just it's just funny, because 5 years ago that would never have happened. Brands are bolder in the sense that they trust our audience are here. Let's go meet them there. Let's bring them into our world. Tommy Hilfiger did it with I don't know if you know Kat from finance. She's like this random finance worker who was taking these selfies in her work mirror of her outfit every day. And again, it was just that kind of raw, unfiltered thing. Oh, she's a lawyer, yeah. And they made her part of the campaign recently. And you're just like, all these brands that are bringing people from, they're going again to their consumer and saying, what are they watching? Who are they looking at? And bringing them in. And it's just great, right? Because it just feels real.
Within luxury, that is super interesting, because it's almost like relatability is the new luxury, isn't it? And you're seeing it with Loewe, you're seeing it with Burberry, and it's like being quirky, being very current and on the pulse. And yeah, you're getting, instead of a celebrity, you're getting Bus Auntie to kind of in your main campaign, right? And that's the way it's shifting, is that these creators and these kind of social first influencers are the new celebrities in a way, and that's being seen in luxury as well as other industries as well. So the whole spectrum is shifting, and influencers, partners, creators, how you get that insight into what's really happening. That's basically the key, isn't it, to making the right moves.
And with them, even, it's just about interrogating that creative brief. The whole mission behind Burberry is about representation of British heritage.
Yeah,
but that means something very different now to what it did 30 years ago, right? And that's what they've done incredibly well, which is, right, we need to display Britishness to our new audiences. What does that look like now? And then how can we talk about it that is authentic to us, but then also taps into the these interesting cultural partners and moments as well. So yeah, it's a great example, man.
Yeah, nice, cool. So it's called Pulse. So finger on the pulse. What's coming up, do you think? What in your world, what do you think? We've obviously talked a lot about what's happening at the moment. We talked a few kind of, trends within PR, but do you think over the next 6 months, what's going to be the killer thing that's going to be shifting in the industry?
I think experiences aren't going anywhere. I think we're personally, I feel like we're saturated online. There's so much content out there. Everyone's doing really good content and doing it in ways that you're like, where they're not even showing the brand anymore. Everyone's tried everything. And I feel like we've come a bit full circle of like, yeah, that's cool, but people still want that in real life experience. And I just feel like the blending of the two and making sure that they feel really great and doing things that are meaningful in the right places, to me, is where PR goes. It's where social starts and ends. Like, social becomes the build up to something. And I just feel like people are going to get cleverer with how they're doing that, because events are expensive, right? They take a lot of resource to do, but actually it's about, DJ AG shown us, you show up somewhere, you bring a vibe and people will come. And like, it's about how do you get clever and bring people together in real life to create and get people to feel again. I've said that so many times today, but to me, a brand that's trying to build themselves has to get people to feel what they are and who they are. And there's no better way than doing that in real life, right? You can pump out as much content as you want, but unless it's never going to be as meaningful, right? So I think, to me, one, that's the opportunity, and two, the place that people are going to start trying to find how to do that in different ways. Because as I say, I feel like social, there's obviously so much more to come, but people have exhausted every type of avenue of like short form, long form, brand in your face, brand not even there, ambassador, influencer. Like, there's so much happened. There's so much to play with in real life, spaces that people don't get to go to, people out in public, bringing people that wouldn't normally get together, giving people exclusive access. What's the mechanic behind that? So much fun to be had. And then so many people to bring into those places as well. It's just like, that to me is where the magic really happens. People talking in real life and experiencing it and then probably going away with something. That to me is exciting. And then I guess on the flip side of it, the unknown is like what AI is going to do to the industry. Like, we haven't really talked about it that much today, but it's just the way that it's shaped content already, and it's its infancy. The way that it's going to continue changing the way that people engage with what they see online, again, tells me that at some point, trust in what's being seen online, authenticity in what's being seen online, has got to come to a bit of a head and a bit of a place where people are a bit like, ugh, it's too much. It's too much. I don't really know what's going on here anymore, and revert back to that real life that you can't fake. And I think, again, to me, people that think of PR in the old school sense, it's like the people that are like the puppeteers in the background that are trying to create this shrouded mystery and whatever. It's not a very trusted industry. And I think you can't fake it in real life. So that to me is like the big opportunity, exciting thing.
Good way to end it. Thank you for coming on.
Nice. Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.